Yo! Hey, listen, Gaming here, and welcome to another audio-free version of Skyward Sword. I'm still suffering the audio issues, unfortunately. It will get fixed later on, but today what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat what I did last episode in terms of the music in the background and me talking over the top, and hopefully that'll do well. So, last episode I encountered a small issue with a little boss fight, and I will never forgive Ghirahim for how bad he made me look at this game. And after dying a couple of times, I took a look and thought, actually I'm maybe a little under-equipped. So I've decided to go back to Skyloft. I'm going to go pick up a few bits and pieces that should help. I basically have given up on the boss fight for this episode so that we can go do some side quests, pick up some heart pieces and a couple of items that I missed before, and then by the end of this, hopefully we can come back and beat him. Fingers crossed. Because today is kind of a filler episode of sorts, we won't have a theory today because there's no real theory to do on the stuff that we're going to go and do. Other than Batro, who I think we'll see later on if I've planned this alright, and he's a hard one to really theorise because there's so little information given about him in the game, apart from being a demon who somehow manages to turn into a human and isn't evil like most of the demons in the game. I don't know, I might try later on in the series to come up with something coherent to talk about with him, but for now, I wanted to break away and just have some fun with the series. So, with that, let's start. Skyward Sword has some really unique items to the game, and as additions to the series in fact. Some are very interesting and have amazing game mechanics that change the way the game and the way it plays entirely. It's because of this that I thought today, instead of looking at a theory, that would have a look at these items and rank them in terms of a few set criteria. After all, if we rank most of these items based on personal preference, I don't think many, in comparison to other Zelda games, would actually make it much past the C or B rank. The criteria I'll be judging these on will be the following. Item uniqueness. How unique the item is to the Zelda franchise in general. Item usefulness. How useful is the item in general in the game? Dungeon impact. How much it impacts the dungeon or area that it's found in. Boss battle use. How it gets used within the boss battle within that dungeon. And the aesthetic. Just how good the design of the item is in general. There are a couple of items that I've omitted from this list as well. These are items that are generally seen as quite passive, so these are the Fire Shield earrings, the Sailcloth and the Water Dragon scale. These items aren't usable from within the item wheel and are generally used in order to traverse an area, in order to reach the next dungeon or area, and therefore can't be judged on many of the criteria that I just listed. So with that said, let's have a look at the items within Skyward Sword and let's see if there are any worthy of the coveted S rank. The Slingshot. The Slingshot is given to us by Buka, the elder of the future Deku tribe, the Kikwi. And if you haven't checked out that theory yet, it's an absolute cracker and worth a watch. You can see it on the card above now. But back to the Slingshot. You get given it after finding his 3 missing Kikwi. The Slingshot is primarily used to open the entrance to Skyview Temple, Skyward Sword's first dungeon, which hopefully we'll get to finish later on today. In general, the Slingshot isn't that unique of an item, having made an appearance in 4 of the main Zelda games. First appearing in Ocarina of Time in 1997, the Slingshot then went on to appear in Oracle of Seasons on the Game Boy Color, Four Swords Adventure and Twilight Princess on the GameCube. However, this incarnation of the Slingshot does add, once upgraded to the Scattershot, something a little different to the series. The Scattershot enables you to fire multiple shots in a wider range, letting you hit more opponents with a singular shot. However, this still isn't the first time that this item has made an appearance. In Zelda Oracle of Seasons, which first debuted in 2001, the Scattershot is named the Hyper Slingshot, and it again fires 3 seeds of your choosing. This creates a wider range. However, it would fire 3 seeds and therefore use 3 seeds. With the Scattershot in Skyward Sword, it only eats up 1 bullet, as it seems to split the seed into 3 prior to use. In terms of its uniqueness, the Slingshot is definitely not a unique item, and so it begins with its journey with us ranking it quite low. So let's have a look at the general usefulness then. See if we can help boost its score a little. When we first get given the Slingshot in Skyward Sword, we must use it to open the Skyview Temple and activate some of the switches in order to raise and lower the water level within the dungeon. The water mechanic within the dungeon enables us to traverse the dungeon and find enough small keys in order to progress and eventually reach our next main item. However, once we unlock the Beetle, the use of the Slingshot wanes quite heavily and it soon gets relegated to being used not very much at all. This is a shame because the mechanics of the Slingshot are actually quite fun. The arc and trajectory of the seeds gets taken into effect and really makes you think about how best to attack Skulltulas and other rogue-dwelling bokoblins. And in all truth, once you've used this item for its base use, which is accessing the Beetle, the Slingshot does become almost redundant. However, as I alluded to just now, the usefulness within the dungeon itself is something that cannot be understated. Skyward Sword has an odd habit. It often gives you a slightly more offensive item outside of the dungeon you're about to visit, and it gives you a slightly more defensive item within the dungeon itself. That breaks away actually of giving you one item at a time, all housed within dungeons functions and mainly being offensive items. The slingshot is absolutely pivotal to the early stages of the Skyview Temple, and you cannot in fact solve many of the puzzles without it prior to receiving the beetle. Now, boss battle usefulness. Unfortunately for the slingshot and the beetle, the boss battle against Ghirahim is a straight sword fight. While it's a very fun fight that teaches you how to use the sword to better effect, and it really makes you a master of the motion or analog controls, it doesn't utilise either of the dungeon items and so renders them completely pointless within the final battle of Skyview Temple. So now this leaves the aesthetic, and the slingshot looks like a slingshot. The slingshot itself is nothing to write home about, but the scatter shot, now that's a completely different beast. With what appears to be a dragon, or even possibly a Loftwinger's head on the front, it creates the illusion with the arms of the slingshot almost creating wings. It looks super cool. The general colouring feels a bit of a nod back to the King of Red lines from the Wind Waker, the bright red, and then even the blue hand grip being a very similar shade to the motif on the flag of the small boat. I generally actually really like the look of the scatter shot, and I think it brings a unique take on what is generally quite a mundane item. But being honest, it's literally the aesthetic of the scattershot that saves this from falling into being a C tier item. So with that, I'm going to have to put it down as a B. The Beetle. Found after your first encounter with a Stalfos inside the Skyview Temple, the Beetle is a mechanical scarab beetle that can be used for a multitude of tasks. The Beetle is by far one of the most unique items found within the game, and series in general, and it's almost taken on a bit of an iconic stance as one of the most loved and simultaneously hated items within the Zelda franchise. This item is found literally nowhere else within the Zelda universe, and due to the motion controls being a major staple part of the game, because the game was originally released for the Nintendo Wii, and we wanted to utilise all of their motion control goodness, even the concept of this little buggy wuggy was brand new. The closest we got in a 3D Zelda title before this was the aim controls of the bow, slingshot or hookshot, but the notion of being able to actually control something you're able to fly around the screen was completely new to the Zelda series. As touched upon previously, the beetle sees you firing it by aiming before taking control of the beetle, flying it around the area in search of items to pick up, enemies to stun, or switches to hit. This makes for some really interesting game mechanics. However, the controls don't feel very intuitive, and until you get the quick beetle upgrade, the flight of the beetle feels very slow and clunky. However, this little scarab is one of the most useful items in the game. Even after we finish Skyview Temple and head to the neighbour, we get ourselves an upgrade to the Hook Beetle, which can then pick items up and drop them directly on the heads of our mortal enemies. This is used mainly to cross the desert and play a high-tech bomb skip ball, but unfortunately the beetle suffers from slowness like no other item before it also, and it feels sometimes like it elongates these periods of play, making them less playable in the future. In terms of the dungeon it comes from, Skyview, the beetle has a massive impact on the dungeon it resides in. Once we've unlocked the beetle, we can use it to drop fines down to swing on to advance in the dungeon, pick up rupees, and even hit switches that we can't get to without the item. This dungeon depends on the beetle for progression, and even comes in useful in the return to Skyview by getting us to drop bombs on enemies that we can't get to without walking across a tightrope and being hit off of it before we reach said enemy. Boss battle wise though, again, I mentioned this earlier on, the fight against Ghirahim does not use any items other than your sword arm in order to defeat him, and as such, there's absolutely no use for this dungeon item to be used within the fight. I don't mind this so much because the fight is brilliant without any of the other items, but it is very rare for a dungeon inside of a Zelda game to not use the item from within the dungeon that the boss resides in. So let's talk looks. The beetle is one crazy looking item. As I spoke about in the last episode, and the cards above now if you want to give this one a look, it's probably my favourite of the series so far. This little bug is almost Egyptian in design. It's designed to look like a scarab beetle, and it does the job of this on its own. However, the aesthetic gets even better with time. One of the things I actually adore about Skyward Sword is the upgrade system and how items reflect the upgrade via the look once they've been upgraded. The Hook Beetle, the first upgrade to the beetle, literally adds two pincers onto the front of the item, which definitely furthers its cause of being a scarab. The Quick Beetle upgrade sees the beetle go on an epic diet and cut half of its body mass in order to become leaner and quicker with its flight. And the Tough Beetle adds what seems to be armor casing, allowing for it to take an extra hit before it returns to its sender. I love the aesthetics of the beetle. It's a beautiful item that reminisces a golden scarab brooch, and it really fits the theme of this item brilliantly. For me, the beetle is a really unique item. It's got a great look, but the mechanics do let it down a little. It does get better over time with the upgrades, as it should, but its lack within any boss fight is a bit of a letdown. Overall though, the beetle is a great item, and I'm going to pop this one firmly in A. The Bug Net. I can't believe I'm covering this one. The Bug Net is obtained by spending all of your hard-earned rupees at Beedle's shop. For the equivalent of a perp, and that's 50 to anyone that doesn't know, you unlock the Bug Net and all of its one real use. See, the Bug Net is only really on the list because it's equipable and it's usable from the weapon wheel, but make no mistake, this item is single track minded. It has one sole use, at least one that you all know about anyway. The bug net, in all honesty, is an homage. It's a throwback to an earlier year, specifically 1991, where you'd be given a bug net in A Link to the Past by a sick child, where it's used to capture bees and fairies. Funnily enough, in Skyward Sword, it plays pretty much exactly the same role again, this time being used to collect bees, fairies and other items that may help craft some upgrades for your beetle, or other upgradable weapons. I just really want to upgrade my beetle, okay? The net doesn't just appear in A Link to the Past either though. It makes a re-emergence. It reappears in A Link Between Worlds, which is of course the spiritual successor to A Link to the Past. As far as uniqueness goes, it's not quite as common as some of the items in this game, such as the slingshot, bombs or bow, but it certainly isn't unique to the series. And like I said, it feels a bit like an homage to it more than anything. In terms of its usefulness, this is where the bug net really stands out. The bug net enables you to collect bugs, moving items such as tumbleweed and stray fairies. A lot of these items can be used to help craft potions or upgrades for weapons, which really comes in useful. The upgrades aren't ever vital to the game, they're not necessary, but they do help with the difficulty of the game. And as such, the net acts in this instance as the facilitator of difficulty. Either you don't use it and you expect a harder game, or use it every opportunity you have to give yourself every advantage going forward. The net does have one hidden use though. The real reason why it's in the game and the real reason why it's an homage to A Link to the Past. A Link to a Past includes an odd mechanic where you could knock Agnim's bolts back at him playing Dead Man's Volley using the bug net. This gave you a wider reach than using the sword. In Skyward Sword, this is actually replicated in the final battle against Demise. You can use the net to distract the big bad, or if you really want to get show-offy, you can knock back Demise's Skyward Strikes with the net. With this item though, obviously it's almost impossible to measure how well it performs in dungeons or boss fights because it has no use in these settings, and it wasn't made for these purposes. In terms of the look, the bug net is exactly that. It's nothing special. The big bug net isn't much better either, but an interesting idea is when you look at it, if you flip the image around slightly, you can see two screws heading into the handle that make it look slightly like eyes. The handle therefore ends up looking a little bit like a stick insect. Other than that though, there's not much to say about the bug net. It's pretty simplistic and it does what it says on the tin. It is pretty bland though. So yeah, the bug net is useful. It makes life easier later on, but it's not, in all honesty, essential as an item. It does have an ultra cool Easter egg that links us back to A Link to the Past, and based on that alone, I can't put this as a C rank, so it's going to go into B. The digging mitts. The digging mitts are found initially just before the second dungeon of the game, the Earth Temple, and they're given to you by a Mogma who you save from attack from a horde of Bokoblin. He thanks you so much for saving his life that he gives you the treasure which allows you to seek other treasure, just as the mole race do. These can then be upgraded by Silver a little later on in the game. He's within the Fire Sanctuary, and while the digging mitts are primarily used for digging in soft sand spots, which can reveal items for crafting, hearts, rupees, and even sometimes small keys, later on you can actually travel through tunnels underground via the Mogma mitts, the upgrade. While these seem like a very unique item, this is actually their second entry into the universe, and their appearance in Skyward Sword seems to be a very deliberate nod to the next entry within the universe, 2004's Minish Cap. Or perhaps, as Skyward Sword was all about laying the foundations for future generations to come, the mitts were a deliberate inclusion to help explain the item in the Game Boy Advance's Zelda title. The digging mitts, or Mogma mitts as discussed before, are used to dig in soft soil to help gain rewards. There are several big uses for these, including finding the key fragments for the Earth Temple, which is definitely not one of the most repetitive and laborious segments of the game, right behind collecting tears. After this, you can use them to claim a key within a former dungeon, and then they get used and abused inside of the Fire Sanctuary where they get the massive upgrade. These little mole hands are used quite regularly through the game, and they even serve as an item to help replenish lost hearts, bombs and rupees. Once upgraded, the Mogma mitts are used to dig underground and explore the tunnel systems within the Fire Sanctuary. While wearing the mitts, you descend below the ground and climb through almost top down, reminding me sort of Bomberman games, and utilise bombs in order to blow up rocks that are in your way. There are often switches along the way which you can swipe with your free digging hand as well. The boss, however, again doesn't use the boss item, or the dungeon item, sorry. Skyward Sword loves putting an emphasis on Ghirahim and his freakishly long tongue, and once again, the battle against Ghirahim is a sword fight. It's a really great one, mind you, but the game focuses on hand-to-hand combat as it wasn't initially intended to be motion controlled. In terms of the look of these things, they are essentially gloves with claws. There's nothing special to these at all, and look exactly as I'd expect digging mitts to look. Interestingly, It seems if you take these off, it seems as if Link takes these off and puts them on every time that you use the item, as in cutscenes there's no actual physical sign of the mitts. I actually struggled to know whether or not to include these, as they are technically a passive item. However, you must activate them by pressing a button, and they're not always inherently equipped, so I feel like they could just about be worthy of a spot on the board. So with that said, based on their use, I think these can join the slingshot as a B item. So I think we've done just about everything we can here. So I'm going to head back down now. We've managed to gather a few items together, things like the net and a couple of heart pieces, a couple of little bits and bobs. We've replenished everything in terms of potions, so I'm pretty happy now to go try again. What we'll do as well when we get into the temple is in the big central hub, we're going to go look for a stray fairy. That should help us beat him as well. And then we're going to go for the boss fight once again. We're going to do it this episode, and we're going to go and try and beat Ghirahim. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we have a better result than last time. Bombs. Oh, my explosive friends, where hast thou been? Bombs are an absolute staple of the Zelda franchise. In Skyward Sword, they are found within the Earth Temple and actually have more functionality than normal, as not only can you throw them, but you can also roll them in order to create a more precise explosion. Not only that, but these have learned since the days of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And not only can you pick up bomb flowers as per the former games that I just mentioned, you can actually replenish your bomb bag with them, making sure that you actually never run out of explosives. Bombs have been a part of every mainline Zelda game, making them the quintessential Zelda item, but it also means they score the lowest possible for originality. There is nothing special about these, not quite like the water bombs in Twilight Princess, which are a super cool addition to the bomb family, or the powder keg in Majora's Mask, which takes a small boom and makes it much bigger, similar to the big red bomb in A Link to the Past. However, where these things shine is entirely within their usability. They are the most versatile item in the game, with bombable walls being anywhere and everywhere throughout the surface. They are used often to gain collectibles such as heart pieces or crafting items, but they can be used for a number of uses, and they even get combined with a beetle to create a top-down game of bomb skip ball. In the Nehru, you must drop bombs into baskets specifically made for the bombs, so they can explode and lower a platform. This is done over areas of the desert and makes traversing the desert entirely possible. Inside of the dungeons or in the overworld, they are also used as weapons, and you can pick them up with a beetle and drop them on the heads of your enemies, which is great fun. There are even variants of Bokoblin with huge shields that cover their entire bodies, and you must use a bomb in order to kill these, because otherwise you can't destroy the shield. The bombs are definitely well thought out, especially within Skyward Sword, and it feels like the additional motion controls or analog controls in which a reticle is positioned on the screen for you to work with instead of just being able to throw them like in past Zelda games really does help, and it actually helps lay the foundation for future games like Breath of the Wild. These bad boys are even used almost solely to defeat the boss of the Earth Temple, Scaldera. Scaldera is one of my personal favourite boss fights within the game, because it's somewhat different to the other boss fights that just involve swordplay, and the notion of being chased by a giant molten rock spider is somewhat terrifying, even if the boss gives off a slight cartoonish feel. The aim of the boss is to roll a bomb into the airstream that occurs when Scaldera breathes in. This is actually quite a normal style of boss fight for Zelda games and has been done to death. But what sets this apart is the fact that it feels like it's on a miniature rollercoaster track or part of a minecart track, and you almost play a game of tug of war with the spider, seeing who'll be pushed to the end of their track first. Bombs are absolutely pivotal to this fight. They can't be understated in terms of importance. There is no other item that will do the trick here. Appearance wise though, what's really to say? They're bombs. They have a fuse. The bomb appearance hasn't really changed in, well, forever, at least since A Link to the Past, with the only notable exception to this being within Breath of the Wild. But at least in Skyward Sword, the bombs resemble what they always have. They're big, blue, and go kaboom. Appearance aside though, bombs are an incredibly important item to the Zelda series, and Skyward Sword makes them ultra important. They are used in almost every dungeon that you can revisit later on, and they're even used in the overworld too. Because of this, and their use in the Scaldera fight, you can't deny how important they are to the game, and as such, they need to be ranked accordingly. They do get a bit of drop due to their appearance. I feel they could have maybe benefited from an update to their old outdated design, but along with the beetle, the bombs go into the A rank. The Gust Bellows. Found inside of the Lanayru mining facility, the Gust Bellows work a little bit like a reverse vacuum, blowing out air and blowing away sand and other debris from the floor. Once you find the oversized fan, you'll also find a new type of puzzle within the world. suspended bridges which move when you blow the air in a certain direction. This does add an extra element to this unexpected item. However, in terms of its use, there isn't a massive amount of use once you finish the dungeon that it resides in. Don't get me wrong, there are a few areas that require you to cross suspended bridges once you finish the mining facility. These become fewer and further in between as you advance through the game. Their overall use is relatively low, which is a shame because these could really have added a massive amount to the game. I'd like to imagine a section within Skyward Sword that involves some form of sailing. I'm not saying over water, but maybe over sand, perhaps utilising the sand sea and gust bellows as a method of getting across the vast wasteland. This is in difference to the ship that you take across the sand sea. It would have been nice to have a little bit more controllability over that. There are a number of ways that you could use the gust bellows in this game to a better degree. I feel if you had the ability to inhale items with the gust bellows, for instance being able to absorb pots or enemies and then being able to spit them out almost Kirby style, this could have some real ramifications on the game, and could be used to set up multiple puzzles with crystal switches where enemies need to be spat out in order to activate the switch from over a distance. I do enjoy how you use the gust bellows in order to blow certain enemies away, such as the Froaks, but I really feel like this could have been improved upon. Now, the dungeon itself, that's a different story. The Ghirahim mining facility uses the gust bellows really well and has a good number of puzzles set up in order to facilitate the wind-based item. There's several areas where you need to clear out an area of sand in order to find a switch, and these are really appreciated. My personal favourite is the spike maze room, where you must use the bellows in order to blow sand away that covers a path filled with spikes. You must walk through a narrow path while avoiding the spikes and blowing air in order to clear the area in front of you. This is an example of a wonderful puzzle executed with a dungeon item. The use doesn't stop there though. The boss, the 1,000-year-old arachnid Moldarak, uses the item absolutely brilliantly. The room is a pit of sand with a giant scorpion acting as the stage boss. During the second phase of this fight, he digs under the sand, in which you need to blow away in order to expose him so you can take swipes at his giant eyeballs, which of course are hidden within his claws. This fight is great and it really shows what a defensive weapon can do with bosses. It adds a great game mechanic that unfortunately does not get followed up with well during the game. The appearance of the gust bellows for me though is very confusing. They sort of look like a vacuum cleaner of sorts, and I don't really understand how they would work based on the look of the item. The central cylinder does not seem to expand or contract in order to suck air in or release it, but I presume that the air inside forms a canonical structure and cyclones around the inner body and the main body of the item. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I didn't know this item and I wasn't told it expelled air, then I wouldn't necessarily understand this to be an item that threw out gusts of wind at a high speed. I can't safely say that I can read the design of the item, which is why, although they made an appearance in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, they haven't made an appearance before or after Skyward Sword. I think these probably go down as my least favourite item in the game. I don't think the mechanics are all that bad, but the execution of the item just doesn't really tick many boxes for me. I think if these actually resemble bellows a little more, it might make a little more sense, but I just can't get my head around the design. As a result of this and the waning use of the item after the dungeon that they come from, and yeah, I know you climb the giant tree, but after that it really becomes sparse. I can't put this any higher than a C. Okay, we're back at the boss chamber. We're going to take a little bit of a pause away from ranking the items now and focus purely on the boss because I really want to get this guy beat. I'd really love to be able to move on with the Let's Play. So, let's go. Right. That's a good start. A few solid hits against the hand. There we go, that's a bit better. I'm just going to try and spam it basically. Every time it moves, I'm just going to try and spam it and make sure that I get in as many hits as physically possible. Get off me. Okay. Doing well though. Oh, for Christ. He keeps catching me. It's slowing me down massively. Already lost, or already taken a hit as well, which isn't good. Okay. So, I'm nearly there. It's got to be soon. There we go. We are into phase 2. This has given me so much trouble. I'm really hoping this time around we can get it. So bat these back. Bang. Okay. And he teleports again. He's going to be behind me. And perfect. Whoa, that was a good amount of hits. I'm really happy with that. Run, 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 run. I think I found the only way to get away from that particular attack. Oh, that was silly. Is just to run, basically, and try to get around in a bit of a circle just so he doesn't successfully hit. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's about 4 hits there. That's good. Run, 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 run. He's going to dash. Good. This is going well so far. I don't want to curse it, but it's going really well. I missed those completely, but it doesn't matter because it didn't hit me. Oh, ow. Almost ran straight into him that time. That was not clever. Nearly there though, I think. It feels better than any of the past runs that we've had. Run, run, run. Okay. I just wish he would do, like, stand in his stance again. Ah, there. There we go. Oh, no! Oh, no! I'm so glad I've got a fairy. So glad. Okay. We get another chance. Thank whoever we're thanking. Run again. Oh, he keeps catching me with it now. This isn't good. I don't think he's got many hits left. He seems to have become like a little bit more aggressive. Ah, here we go. There's a little opening there. Managed to get a few slashes in. Is it all good? Right. Run. Ugh. I don't like that attack at all. This boss fight is definitely a difficult one for an opening boss, without a doubt. Not the easiest at all. It's designed to get you used to the sword play, and it definitely makes you a bit of a master of it. No! I did it again! Oh man, okay. Luckily, I've got a potion. So, it gives us another few chances. But we're doing well. I think we are doing well. What, we're about 3 minutes in. We've come close here. Yes! That was it. That was the last hit. Oh my goodness. We've done it. We've beat Ghirahim. Oh, I am so happy. I know this isn't the hardest Ghirahim fight in the game, but I struggled with this for some reason. I couldn't quite put 2 and 2 together. So I am so glad that we managed to get to the bottom of this one and finish it off, because, yeah, that was getting stressful. I thought for a minute I wasn't going to be able to continue on with the Let's Play. But going back and getting the bug net really helped. So, because I think that was what actually enabled things, because we were then able to collect the fairy. And without that, I don't think we would have made it. So, we're going to go collect the heart piece. We're going to go through the door. And we're going to obviously keep the gameplay video intact, but we're going to go straight back to ranking the items. There's not many left now, so it's well worth doing. So, yeah, let's go on and get those items ranked. The whip. Found within the ancient system, the whip is essentially the very best of Indiana Jones meets Zelda. It houses a large handle area, which sort of resembles a giant bell. A red cord is attached to this before a ball of light, which sort of acts as a sticky surface. The whip is used to attach to a lot of different items, from vines to poles and certain branches in the game. They can be used to turn lily pads around and pull out of reach levers. The whip also acts as an item that enables you to grab items from afar, making it a great recovery tool. When we first start looking at its individuality, the whip is only actually used in one other game, and that's Spirit Drags. It's a unique item that barely appears in the series, but is also around a little later on in the series, so it adds lore to the franchise. Once you unlock the whip, it is used in various locations in the game, in almost every future dungeon in the game in fact. It adds an extra element to the game, adding a platform and a makeshift jumping type of gameplay that really helps vary the game up from just being run and slash. Using the whip as a vine is great fun, especially when you can see a massive gap and a rope hiding halfway into the void. You know that you've got to use an item of some format to help pass the gap, and the whip comes in brilliantly during this. Again, in the overworld it isn't used nearly as much as it could be. I would have liked to have seen more puzzles that involved heart pieces or goddess cubes that involve pulling switches or crossing large ravines, using one of the most unique items in the game. It's a shame that it isn't used as widely as it could be, but the game still makes very good use of the item. It just could be better. The dungeon itself is almost an ode to the whip, and that's exactly what a dungeon should be once the item is unlocked. There are puzzles from the off and rooms that you can't get into without it, and you know something is coming to help you with the travel through this dungeon, but I'll be honest, the first time I saw the whip, it definitely came as a surprise that this was the item of choice. At first I was a little underwhelmed by the item, but as the mechanic unfolds more and more, the more I grew to like this item and found it utterly charming with the extra nuances it adds to the game. On top of that though is the boss fight that this item takes part in. Coloctus is a mechanical depiction of Shiva, a guardian of the flame that sits behind it and it will not allow any visitor through without a fight. Using the whip, you must rip the mechanical arms from its body before proceeding to hit the structure with its own weapon that looks like a giant scimitar style sword. This fight is difficult. It's a definite challenge that I'm equally looking forward to and scared of at the same time. And if you don't have your wits about you when you challenge this behemoth, it will destroy you pretty quickly. The fight is fun, a completely different style of boss for the Zelda series, and makes great use of the dungeon item. So far so good, right? The whip is almost the perfect item in the game. It's unique, it's used well in the world and the dungeon it comes from, and it takes part in the best boss fight in the game. But what about its appearance? As I described earlier, this item is without a doubt a whip. It has a regal look to it, the big bell handle laden in gold, and it's inscribed with lotus and various other shapes. You can't really make out the material used for the whip itself, but you can imagine it being made of a leather-esque material, despite its coloration of red which fades into white before appearing teal at the end. It almost looks like a serpent's tongue, without a fork in it, scaled in appearance. It definitely adds intrigue to the design, but what can only be described as a ball of light at its end kind of detracts from its appearance. I understand the notion here. Make it look like a magical artifact of sorts, like it could be made by the Ghirahim to further extend than it appears at times, but the end of the whip just looks like it's been added on as a last minute design change. It looks clumsy and childish, something that was added perhaps to the whip to stop it from looking so plain. It kind of feels a little bit like a Pokemon design in some ways. If you flip the whip upside down and put a pair of eyes on the bell section, you could definitely see this being a part of the Pokemon universe alongside Klefki as an inanimate object brought to life. What I will say though is this. One bad apple doesn't spoil the pie, and so to speak, the item itself on the whole is fantastic. It's one of the best items in the game so far, and it adds an awful lot to the game itself. So for those reasons, despite the lazy design with the light orb, I would be robbing the whip of its proper ranking within this game if I didn't put it in S tier. The claw shots. The claw shots are gained after completing the Silent Realm just before the sandship. These items are primarily designed in order to access out of reach areas via claw shot pads that are located throughout the world. Before we talk about their use within the world though, let's first of all talk about their uniqueness to the series. The claw shot first makes an appearance within Twilight Princess, where you acquire them one at a time. However, there's no need to do this within Skyward Sword as they come together as a package. Maybe this explains their place within Twilight Princess. After all, it's not hard to imagine that after Skyloft falls to Hyrule, they potentially get scattered and separated across the world, hidden away to anyone that isn't the hero of Destiny. However, the claw shots aren't the first incarnation of an item that propels you through the air with a chain and a hook design. When it's described like that, it seems awfully familiar, right? The claw shots in the series replace the hook and long shot. And being realistic about this, the claw shots don't really add or take away from the original design. The claw is the only change in this device, but still, as claw shots, they only appear in this particular design twice within the series. So despite the hook shot existing in other games in the series, this one ranks relatively well in terms of individuality. In terms of their use, the claw shots are used almost everywhere within the game once you unlock them, and they even give you access to the biggest Easter egg in the game. We'll come to that though in the Let's Play when we get there. They are used to access both the Sandship and the Fire Sanctuary, and many collectibles within the game, including several pieces of heart. Unfortunately though, the claw shots never take part in a boss fight. This is a little understandable because the items aren't found within a dungeon, but it still would have been something to utilise these in battle a little more. Just imagine how different the fight against Skirvo would have been, for instance, if you had to grip hold of his electric arm with the claw shots in order to hold him still, or potentially grab one of Tantalus's tentacles in order to pull his head down onto the deck of the ship. This would have changed the fight considerably, and would have added an extra element that would have made the claw shots feel more important as an item within the game. From the triple prong claw to the mechanical chain that is visible from the outside of the glove, to the fact that this is a glove design and not just a handle that attaches to a mechanical motor like the hook shot, I personally love the design of the claw shots. They do exactly what they say on the tin while looking great. Not to mention there's two of them, and that only adds to the appeal as you swing from claw shot pad to claw shot pad and find your next target. They really add a lot to the game, and the design clearly fits the brief. For me, the claw shots are one of the best items in the game. They're fun to use, they're a great design, and they're widely used within the game. They work well within the game, and for those reasons I can safely say that the claw shots in Skyward Sword are worthy of a coveted S rank. The bow. I'm in shock here. The bow is officially the last item you receive in the game, inside of the Sandship. This is in stark contrast to much of the Zelda series, where the bow is generally found relatively early on. I can only presume this is not to completely railroad the slingshot, but the bow really isn't the biggest key item in this game this time round. The bow is generally seen within the series as one of the most important staples, alongside the bombs. In Ocarina of Time, you receive this as your second major item as an adult, and in Majora's Mask it's the only real key item you need, as you receive different flavours of arrow throughout each dungeon you beat. However, Skyward Sword bucks that trend and tells us that maybe your most important items in the future are not so important currently. The bow, it's not a special item, it's a bow, it's that simple. And it's a bow that has been a part of 12 of Link's adventures so far. In fact, as far as I'm aware, the only games in the series that don't include the bow are the Oracle games on the Game Boy Color and Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link on the NES. Originality goes out the window though when we talk about nostalgia, and nothing at all screams Zelda quite like the bow and arrow. Normally the Zelda world is filled with switches that can only be activated via the bow, or multiple arrow types appear in order to help you as the hero unlock areas within dungeons or the overworld. There's nothing like that in Skyward Sword though. It's utilised within the Sandship and not much else. Disappointingly, it's not even used massively within the Skykeep, which is the equivalent of Ganon's Castle from Ocarina of Time, the final dungeon in the game that makes use of just about every main item so far. The boss, however, is a saving grace for the bow. Tantalus is an odd boss, one that I'll touch on in a future video more, but he pretty much has the sole purpose for the bow. You shoot him in the eye to get him to fall over and then give him a good thwacking before shooting him some more. The boss fight is fun, it feels epic, and it works very well with the reticle aiming of the bow, but let's not skirt around it. The bow looks like exactly what it's always been, and what it probably always will be. It's a bow made of wood and string that allows the arrow to be knocked. It's pretty simplistic and follows a design that has gone right the way through the Zelda series, so no surprise. Once upgraded though, the bow takes on a fantastic look of its own. The iron bow upgrade coats the wood with spiked metal, making it look like a gothic nightmare, whilst the string gets coloured purple to make it look like, whilst it doesn't, it shoots poison arrows. The upgrade to this is a wing design that looks absolutely beautiful. Its golden green design is elegant, and the small wings that hold the arrow in place, you can imagine it would help the arrow remain in position once knocked so that the aim remains true, is absolutely gorgeous. The curvature adds into the design that really helps a sense of majesty to the bow, and whilst it retains that purple string for the iron bow, that's really the only callback to that version. The upgrades, however, don't really add anything to the bow other than more power and range, and a lack of elemental arrows is a bit of a letdown, as well as the fact that it comes to you so late in the game. As a result, this is probably one of the worst bows in the history of the Zelda franchise, and for my liking it can only realistically be given a B rank. With the bow, that's it. We found every major item in the game, and we've ranked them according to their use in the game, their appearance, design, and originality to the series. But let me know what you guys think. Are there any items you prefer, or things that you didn't think were quite right, or that you thought maybe that item didn't deserve its rank? Let me know in the comments. I really look forward to hearing what you guys say. So, I think we're going to call it a game here. We've had a really productive episode by the looks of things. We've managed to rank every item in the game. And not only that, we've managed to defeat Ghirahim and now unlock Lanayru as well as an area. So with that, I'm going to love you and leave you all. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you watching these videos. Please get involved in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you've seen. Thank you so much. Love you. Bye.